Hey everybody, my name is Paul Womack. They call me Willie Green, producer, engineer based here in Brooklyn, New York, and this is my studio. Welcome to the greenhouse. Today we're going to do a mixed breakdown of a record off the new recent Billy Woods album called Terror Management. The song is one I produced and Woods rapped on because I can't rap. The song is called Stranger in the Village, so just kind of take you through it, let you know what I did so you can see what you like, what you want to do for yourself, and we'll go from there. So, main first thing I always want to do when I start a mix is I want to listen to the song. It's very important to understand what the song wants from you and what direction you need to go in. The song will let you know. If you pay attention to that and just listen off the jump, you'll know what you need to tweak, what you need to adjust, and what already sounds good, and you can leave there. We'll just run a little bit from the top.
European vacation. 10, 7, 8, 9. Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of rare pelts. Helm the skull of caribou. Blood on the ice shell, snares and simple loops. Trinkets the bitches think it's cute. Dirty pictures that he keep out of view. Minor riches looted from who know who. Piano wild and spoon thread for the loom. Dog-eared first edition of Barracoon. Jargool mixed grab out the jet fuel. Ivory mouth, skin so black it's blue. They never been south, never seen the dunes. Regale them with tales of cartoon. Eyes big enough to drown. Gather round, gather round. Everything for sale except the scale. Everything for sale except the scale. That's coming with me. That's coming with me. That's everything for sale except the scale. That's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale except the scale. That's coming with me. That's coming with me.
All right, so that's a good, just kind of overall view of it. It's not a long song. So let's take a look at what elements we've got in the song and then figure out what we need to do. This is a pretty straightforward mix. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles as far as production. We got kick, snare, hi-hats, something's on the cymbal track. Then we got bass, we got a couple guitar samples, a voice sample, and then a lead vocal and a dub track. First thing I do when I start a record, you got to remember that your most important tools that you've got are your faders and your pans. Just with those two tools alone, you can go a very long way. So let's take a look at where things are living in this song. Generally, your low-end stuff, your bass, your kicks, any of that kind of thing, you're going to want to probably keep them pretty central. When your low-frequency things are panned, if you're panning them off to the side, you wind up with a kind of heavy head thing where you kind of, if you're panning your kick to the left, everything feels weighted down to the left. If you're panning your bass to the right, you're feeling, right heavy. But your low frequency stuff, when that's dead center, when that's right up the middle, your mix will feel rooted, it'll feel balanced on both sides. And so one caveat, one thing I believe is you gotta understand the rules of something so you can know when and how to break them. I'm always down for breaking any rules. There's no rules to music because it's art. You can do anything, but before you go off and just do any old thing, understand the techniques that you're departing from so you have an anchor to really do some wild stuff. Let's jump to where the vocal comes in. The vocal is another thing. My vocals are always going to be dead center. My lead vocals, at least, are going to be dead center because that's the focus of a song. If you got a vocal in your record, that's the focus of your record. That's a rule that I live by. So if we jump right to where the verse drops.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of rare pelts. Helm the skull of caribou.
I'm not doing a whole ton to Woods' voice, just a little bit. I've got my trusty Fab filter, my Pro Q3. What I'm doing first and foremost, I'm filtering out anything under 100 hertz, unless you're dealing with you know, some real Barry White, some low vocals, something like that, there's not going to be a whole lot useful below 100 hertz. And what you're going to wind up there is you're going to wind up with rumbles and certain things that you don't want in your vocal, but you want to clear that rumble out before you start compressing. Right? So there's frequencies down there, the subsonic frequencies that might just be there from room rumble or whatever's going on in the studio. And those things are they're going to take up energy, and it's going to mess up the threshold and the way your compressor reacts if all this the big low frequencies and sound waves down there that you don't even need are in that compressed signal. So the first thing I do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take out that bottom. If I solo this vocal, let's see how much of a difference we hear with and without that filter.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of rare pelts, helm the...
So already the big difference you hear is in the plosives. Every time he hits that puh, and Woods has a very aggressive, kind of a tacky type of rhyme style. So anytime he hits that puh, we're getting that plosive. We don't want that. That's just distracting from the lyrics, and it's also, that's gonna hit the compressor every time with all that big energy. So we're gonna filter that out. I believe I recorded this vocal originally, and if I did, I would have done it with a Shure SM7B. It's a great mic for rap vocals. That's my go-to. I do that with the Cloud Lifter, and it's just, the Cloud Lifter adds some more detail to it, but being dynamic, you can still attack it like Woods does, like a lot of MCs do. So I'm going to the SM7B as far as a mic choice. But you got to understand your gear, right? So the SM7, there starts to be a little bit of a buildup, you know, in that 200 to 300 range. That's the mud range. That's where things, when you're hearing a track and you feel, man, there's just not that clarity there, before you start boosting the high, consider starting to notch out a little bit of that low mid. That's going to be the mud. Is going to make it seem brighter and clearer by comparison. Everything in mixing is about contrast. Nothing feels bright if everything is bright, and so you want to kind of work sometimes against where you want to go. You want to work in the different direction, and that will actually get you there. So here's an example. I'm going to take out that 244, about 245 hertz.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of rare pelts, helm the skull of caribou, blood.
So that's subtle, but it's just enough to make sure that everything he's saying is clear. Woods is a very deep rapper. His lyrics are pretty complex. So it's very important that everything that he says is crystal clear and understandable, so you can get those bars that might already be over your head. If the vocal isn't clear, you've got no chance to understand what this man is saying. So it's important. Clarity is always key. After that, I've got OEK Sound Soothe. This is one of those plugins that is so, it works so easily, you kind of feel like you're cheating when you're using it, but that's all right. We don't have to do everything the hard way every time. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, people spend a lot of time making very creative things. We can stand on the shoulders of giants and use those tools to not do everything the hard way. I'll bypass this.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of rare pelts, helm the skull of caribou, blood.
So what Soothe is kind of like, it's an automatic EQ. It's going to reduce resonant frequencies. So if something starts building up, it's going to analyze those frequencies, and it's going to start taking down in those areas. I like the overall sound of Woods' voice, but sometimes when he gets more aggressive, it starts to peak. And so I want to control those things. So again, we're in that 250. This is probably like 350 hertz. And then also up top, I don't have a de-esser on his vocal because it's not super sibilant, but there's a couple spots where it gets a little spicy. So we're up here. This looks like it's probably around 10 to 12K. Just when that pushes, it's just going to reduce that sibilance a little bit. Following that, I've got a hardware compressor. I've got this Golden Age Products Comp 3A. It's a Yuri LA 3A clone. It's something that I've gone to that type to that type of compressor for Woods for a very long time. Its attack and release just fits what he does. So that's where I'm going there, and I'm not taking off a whole ton. When I recorded this, I would have used a compressor going in, so I don't need to squash it, but just enough to keep it even so he's always hanging right in front of you. Every word that Wood says is right there for you and is just ready to be deciphered. So let's see.
Came through atop of half that mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red.
So I'm never taking off any more than about 2 dB of gain reduction. Again, this is not to squish it down so much, but just to hold it in place just so he doesn't go anywhere. Following that, so that's the main vocal chain. I've got a couple plugins on here, got a little bit of sauce. We'll get back to the sauce in a little bit. We deal with that later on. So that's the vocal. The reason I start looking there even before the track, we got to make the track thump. It's got to bang. But again, the vocal is the key, and I want to have the vocal in shapes when I start mixing other elements of the mix, they're working with it. We're not mixing karaoke records here, so the vocal's always going to be there for the listener. Everything has to be based off of that. Let's look at how the vocal interplays with these samples. I'm gonna go ahead and mute the drums here for a second. Get out of here. And we'll mute the bass too. So let's just hear.
Came through atop of half that mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red pelts. Helm the skull of caribou. Blood on the ice shell, snares and simple loops. Trinkets the bitches think it's cute. Dirty pitches that he keep out of view.
So let's look at what we've got with these samples. We've got, this is the main one here, this guitar type thing. Pretty straightforward. There's nothing, it's not prog rock, so we're not, doing a lot of notes here. This is just about getting the texture in there and getting the vibe. And let's see what we're doing with that. I've, of course, got my trusty fab filter. So we're filtering out that bottom again. We've got a very large synth bass going on here, and then we've got a big kick. So we got to make room in that bottom end. There's a finite amount of energy, a finite amount of space that you can have in a mix. And low frequency waveforms are larger waveforms that take up more energy. So you got to be sure to leave space. If you want your bass to really ring out and really rattle your subs and really hit in the club, you got to leave space for it. If there's other things roaming around down there, all it's doing is clouding the issue. So if I'm dealing with a sample, especially if it comes from vinyl. This didn't come from vinyl, but that's a very important thing. If you're sampling off of a record, remember there is record noise there. A record noise isn't just the crackles up top, it's also a rumble. You're dragging a needle across the thing, so it's gonna create rumble for you. Maybe you want that, but most times that rumble is probably taking up space that could be better used elsewhere. So if you're sampling vinyl, unless you're sampling the bass line or the drums with that kick, go ahead and just nudge that high pass filter up until it's not taking away from the sound that you want. Don't take out what you want, but it's cutting out what you don't need. So that's this first. So that's here, and then we did a little bit of dip. Right, so we're gonna start getting that out because I'm gonna bring the vocal back in, and that's gonna explain to you what the second dip is. So Fab Filter, the Pro Q3 is dope because each EQ point can be stereo, left, right, or it'll do mid-side. So I'm notching some out 267, so in that mud range again. I'm notching that out to leave in the center to leave more space for the vocal. So the sides will still have a little more of that size in that area, but I'm leaving that pocket right here so Woods can just stay right there and stay where he needs to be and be open and clear.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red pelts. Helm the skull of caribou, blood on the ice shell, snares a simple.
And now you see, I didn't adjust the vocal at all, but just making that room within the sample, the vocal already sounded more clear. So I don't have to do extra EQ on the vocal to make it sound that way, because the more you EQ something, no matter how great the EQ is, you're starting to introduce phase problems. If you have to do hard boosts or something like that, you're adding phase issues to your vocal and you're compromising your sound. So that's why it's important, start with the right mic, start with the right preamp, whatever your vocal chain is, get it as close to finished before you even get into the box, and then you don't have to do all that work later on. You know, make it easy on yourself. So that's our first sample here. Our second one just comes in at the turnaround of the beat. So every 4 bars we get...
Helm the skull of caribou.
That right there, that. So just that. That's just, from a production standpoint, I want the loop to come back around. I want to lead you back into the top of the loop while Woods is riding over the whole thing. I don't know, what did I do to that? Not a lot. I've got a little bit of compression going on. I've got some compression going on that first guitar too. Again, it's not a ton, but just enough just to tuck things where they need to be. I don't want to overbake everything, but I want to cook it up properly, but not overbake it. And then the third part of the sample is so just that vocal piece. For that, I wanted a little more warmth on it, so I put it through the millennia, through the what is this? The TCL2. That's from the Plug-in Alliance. They got great stuff too, and that's nice warm opto compressor, but just something to give it a little more weight. I don't want that part of the sample to be thin. I want that to hold some space there. So if we get all the samples in together.
Urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red pelts. Helm the skull of caribou, blood on the ice shell, snares and simple loops.
Now we've got a nice, this is what I call the music part of it. I know drums are music too. I firmly believe that. But basically, I break my mix down. Let's actually look at just how my rig is set up a little bit. So over here, I've got 5 subgroups and then 3 main final groups I run everything to before it hits the mix bus. And I've kind of got this funnel system going on. I've stolen tricks, steal tricks from people. Steal the stuff I'm telling you right now, steal from other people. I've stolen some parts of this technique, some from Michael Brower, some from Joey Raya. Listen to people who you think are great and then emulate what they do. That's how you learn how to make your own greatness. You gotta take a little bit from other people. So all my drums come down to this appropriately named drum bus, and so that's going to be so that's straightforward. Subs is going to be my basses. If I've got 808s, this track doesn't have an 808, but if I got an 808 that I don't want to be in that same drum mix, I might put that into subs. That's going to be all your low end stuff. That's going to be the bottom. And music is what falls into everything that falls into neither of those categories instrumentally. So it's pretty much everything else. In this case, it's the 2 guitar tracks, it's the vocal sample thing, all those things are going here. And then lead vocals go to leads, background vocals go to backgrounds. I like to keep things simple, right? So everything is coming down to these tracks, and that's so when I'm done with the mix, I can just print my stems, and I've got all my stems set up, because stems are currency nowadays. If you're not printing stems, you really got to do that. Remember, DJs don't break records anymore, Netflix does. right? HBO does. If you want your record played on the new episode of Insecure or Watchmen or whatever's going on, they're gonna, as part of your deliverables, they're gonna want your stems, because then they don't have to come and find you and chase you down if they just want to use just the drums for a scene or just the strings for a scene. So get used to printing stems for everything. Then all of my stems, all of these groups are now coming down to my final three sub buses, which is instrumental, vocal, and effects. Pretty straightforward. All my instrumentals go to one spot, all my vocals come to another spot, and then my effects go to their own, all my sound effects return to their own group. And that's so if everything's feeling a little too wet or a little too dry, I can adjust that. But also when I print my stems, I print my acapellas dry. So if somebody wants to do a remix later on, they're not locked into whatever craziness I might have put on there. So these three groups now, so we have the top five, then we come down to the three in the funnel, and then we come down to my mix bus, where I keep a few things on it. Nothing super duper crazy. Actually, that's not even on there. We'll get rid of you. I'm using this Type A from Audio Thing. Emulates a Dolby noise reduction circuit that a lot of people really liked, and it gives me like a nice finished sound on that. Using a little bit of hardware, so I've got some DIY recording equipment color palettes on here, just to give me a little bit of spice on the mix bus. What do I have on this one? I've got an op amp just for a little bit of something. I've got some Cinemag transformers that give me some really nice depth. And then I've got a tape saturation circuit in there, just to give me, especially the one that DIY recording makes. It's got a nice bottom to it. It's got a nice thump, and it's hip hop, so it's got to have the fat booty. You got to have the bottom end. And then I got a couple compressors on here, but we'll come back to mix bus compression in just a little bit. I don't want to jump too far ahead. Now let's start to bring these drums in, and let's see how these are hitting. I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna loop up 4 bars, because let's focus in on this one area.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red pelts, helm the skull of caribou. Came through atop a half.
So the drum pattern itself is pretty simple. And that's fine. Everything doesn't have to take up all the space. The hi-hat.
Came through atop a half-dead.
Hi-hats not in the full trap lane, but they've got a little bit of that fast, I would say, I don't know, it's probably like a 16th note or 32nd note triplet, something like that. And you see our kick, snare is on every 3. So pretty straightforward with that, but now let's look at the relationship with the drums and the bass. So we're talking about making sure that these drums knock. And you might be thinking, well, Green, that kick isn't the biggest, heaviest kick in the world. Well, again, there's only so much room. Everything cannot be gigantic, and we're dealing with this bass. A very good friend of mine, a very wise man named Alex Wenger once told me, look, everything can't live in the basement. You got to make a decision on what's going to be your super low, your subs, that foundation, and then what's going to be your low. And you got to kind of decide whether it's going to be the kick or whether it's going to be the snare that's going to do that. And this song, the kick or the bass that's going to do that. In this song, I decided that the bass was going to be that super bottom. It was partially a production decision, also a mixed decision that we've got these long lines in the bass in the bass track, so we'll just let that lay the foundation, let the kick come in over on top, and just kind of smack on top of that. So here's the bass soloed. So with those long tones like that, I decided we'll let that be the bottom, and then let's look at the kick, and let's look at what we're doing on the kick. So I've got a little bit of a boost down at the bottom of that kick because I want it to feel solid, but then I'm notching out. This is at, what is that, 178? So even a little bit below that mud zone. Can't notch everything in the mix there because then you're not going to have any 250, and you want to be balanced from the top to the bottom. But if I take this out, what do we sound like? So it's not super obvious, which is good. I don't want to lose my whole bottom, but again, we're talking about making room, and if this kick and this bass are going to be playing at the same time, it's just like a puzzle. We're going to fit it in there so it fits in the cracks, and then our low end is just full and solid. And then you see I got a little bit of boost up here. This is at, what is that, 831, and I want a little bit of that smack on the kick. This kick drum, it's more based on an acoustic, regular type of kick than like an 808 or a kick drum that is originating from an electronic standpoint. And so I want the smack of what would be the kick drum beater. I want a little bit of that impact to cut through because the main bass is all down here, but I want the punch. In that way, especially on bass challenge systems, that punch is always cutting through, you're always getting the smack, and it lets the listener know where the kick is. Even if they don't have the full bottom end, they know where that's gonna be. As much as, we work in great studios with great monitors and all these things, we gotta remember everybody's not as lucky as us, and they're not listening on that same type of equipment, so it's gotta be able to be heard everywhere. So now let's take a look at the snare, and again, you already see I've got my high pass filter there. Any rumble that's down there, we don't need it. We want to leave all that space wide open for our kick and our snare, or for our kick and our bass rather. And then we had a build up. Some frequency was driving me crazy at 354. Let's see what that was about. So it's just, again, open up a little more real estate because I want the clap, I want the smack of that snare, but if it's gonna be that full-bodied, and I'm throwing it into a reverb and everything, if it's that full-bodied with all that 360 or whatever that was there, when that hits the reverb, now all of a sudden that frequency is everywhere, and we don't need that much of it because we've got vocal samples swirling in here. We've got the guitars that are also in those frequencies. So it's just a big puzzle game. This is moving the pieces so something else can sit in there and make sure that it all works together. Hi-hats, I am quite sure I'm filtering. Yep, I got my high pass again, and then I wanted them just to poke out a little bit, so we brought up a little bit in the mid-range. But, when you're dealing with sample packs, when you're dealing with drum kits that you get from somewhere, whether it's Native Instruments or it's Loop Loft or wherever it is, you got to remember somebody processed these things before you got your hand on them. And that's very important to think about. They want you to choose that hi-hat sample over all the other hi-hat samples in the land, and so it's gonna be processed, it's gonna be big, it's probably gonna be bigger than you ever really need a hi-hat track. You can see right here on my fader that track is tucked down there a little bit, and it doesn't need to be everything just enough to get the point across. So I'm taking out that bottom. There's not going to be anything useful for me under 200 hertz in a hi-hat track. That's just not really how hi-hats work. And then the cymbal track is not even a cymbal. Sometimes you got to put a little bit of sprinkles on top, Sometimes you got to hit them with the wind chimes, and that's just what that is. That's just to give that atmosphere to it. So that's the beat. Now I've got compression going on. I'm using the channel strip built into Cubase. So let's see what's happening on the kick. So not crushing it because somebody definitely compressed that kick and tightened it up and did something to it before I got it. I love pressing the buttons, I love doing all that, but I don't want to do it for no reason. If I'm turning a knob, I've got to have a purpose for it. If not, I'm not serving the song. Remember, everything that we do in a mix has to serve the song. Listeners don't listen to your mix, they listen to the artist's record that you happen to mix. It's not just about you. Your mix has to be great, and that's what makes a good song excellent, but don't do things just for the sake of doing them or because Willie Green told you to on a video. Take everything that you hear and apply it where necessary. Hats, I don't imagine I'm compressing. I don't think anyone's ever compressed wind chimes. If you do, leave a note in the comments. Let me know why you're compressing your wind chimes. I want to hear about it. And then the bass, yeah, we've got a little bit of squish on the bass. We had a big buildup, apparently. So that's where all the tubbiness, that's where all the tub in that bass is. We got to leave space. So that had to go. And then after that, we had, again, if I can distort anything at any port, you know I'm going to do it. Elysia makes really awesome stuff. They're a character. It's hardware, it's plug-in. I got the software from Plug-in Alliance. It's got a nice drive, and you can go heavy and really grunge things up. This just needed a little bit of bite, and that's important when we're talking about translating to these bass challenge the speakers and listening devices. If you're just dealing with what's mostly a sine wave bass or not a complicated harmonic sound, those waveforms are just gonna live down there in that subworld, and it's not gonna translate on speakers that can't necessarily reproduce that. But if you add some harmonic content in there through distortion, through saturation or whatever, that starts adding some upper frequency stuff, and that's gonna trick the listener's ear into knowing, okay, the bass is there. I may not be getting the fundamental, but I'm getting the harmonics, I'm getting the overtones, which let my ear know where that bass note is. And so they're hearing that even if the speaker can't necessarily reproduce it. So you can do it right on the track like I am here, and this is parallel. We're at about 40% of this. Let's see what it sounds if we really go overboard and we really do the whole thing. All right, well, I wasn't squashing it. I wasn't doing too much. It's subtle. It's a subtle thing. This isn't, a punk song. This isn't about having a super fuzzed out bass, which is also cool, but just to give that little bit of spice for the listener's ear to hold on to in context on a smaller speaker. So let's jump back in. I'm gonna keep this vocal out for a second, but let's bring the guitars back in, and now let's see how all the pieces are really coming together. We've got that going. Now I'm curious, if we bring back the spot I dipped out of the bass, how does that work against the guitars? To me, that makes a huge difference. It takes everything, and the beat is kind of very just crunching up here, and it just cleared out that area because Woods is gonna come and he's gonna sit right inside there. So now let's bring him in and do that same exercise.
Came through atop of half that mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red pelts, helm the skull of cat.
Taking that out leaves so much more space for his vocal to sit where it needs to be. Whatever I was thinking that day was very smart, apparently. And then, we've also got a little bit of multi-band compression going on with this Nova 67 plugin that I like. I think that's free, so go get it if you don't have it.
Came through atop of half that mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of red.
And so that's just that's happening pretty much below about 60 hertz. Anything below that, when the bass really builds up there, it's just holding it in place. Hip hop mixing is not about having all of the bass, but having clear, controlled bass that you can turn up and it's still banging, but it's not overwhelming. It's not making everything muddy. You don't want just a wave of rumble. You want it to bang clearly so everybody knows just how much that thing is really hitting. So that's what we're doing on the bass. And we looked at the samples. Again, this is a pretty straightforward mix. So let's jump over to our mixer and let's see. We looked at the lead vocal. Oh, let's look at this dub real quick. So let's jump a little further into the song.
Everything for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. That's coming with me.
All right. So what we've got on this dub track.
That's coming with me.
So the track in general, even the hook, is a solo vocal, and we just bring in these dubs at the end just for some more emphasis. But I wanted to, you know, add a little scrunch face. I want a little scrunch factor in the song. So, of course, we had a little bit of drive with the Sound Toys, little Ultra Boy, but I'm also dropping that. I'm dropping that pitch by 8 semitones. So I want, you know, it's not the whole thing. I've got the mix knob at about 40%, but I want that low grumble to come under there because then I'm also splashing that out to the sides. We're going to talk about our send effects in a second, and I want that rumble, part of that space I was leaving in there, we're going to fill it up here and add some aggression with these backgrounds. So we got a little bit of drive, we got the pitch dropped on that. And then I'm EQing following the pitch shift so I can control any artifacts that are coming from there. I'm dropping the pitch, so I gotta have my filter down there to make sure that the bottom end stays clean. I'm rolling off the top end because I don't want it to take over the lead. I want it to fit behind it. So if the lead is here, when you reduce the top end on something in a mix, it pushes it back. It makes it feel like it's further away. So Woods is going to be here, but his dub is going to be back here, right behind him, basically standing behind him, hyping him up. This is the hype man track, right? So we've got that, and then compression.
That's coming with me.
So that's a little more aggressive than I was doing on the lead vocal. We're at like maybe 3-4 dB of gain reduction. I usually compress my dubs a bit harder than I would on a lead vocal because I very much want those to sit right where they're at and don't move. You're there for a reason, but it's a support thing. They don't need to have the same dynamic range that a lead vocal would have because they're just supposed to sit right there and say, that's coming with me. That's your job, so sit there, stay there and do it. But now, as you can obviously hear, we've got the sauce coming in. What am I putting on this vocal to make it sound like that? We're gonna jump back to the lead for a second because some of those things are similar. When I'm mixing rap songs, instead of using reverb to create ambience around the vocal, reverb just isn't really genre appropriate. Like a long reverb on a rap vocal just doesn't really make sense. But I still want to give this sense of space that Woods is somewhere. So what I'm doing is I'm sending it to a slap delay that is pretty short. This one happens to be a preset called Rap Slapback Box #1, pretty appropriate, and it does exactly that. So it's giving me a bunch of short delays rather than a full reverb tail to imply the space without banging you over the head of, oh, Woods is in a cavern, he's not in a cavern, he's right here. So I want to just give him a little space around him. Let's go over to my effects mixer.
Thing for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything.
So you can hear.
Thing for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me.
So with the vocal soloed, that seems like a whole lot of delay, but within the course of the track itself is gonna eat up some of that. It's gonna make it kind of blend in, and so it's not gonna be, if we take off that solo.
Thing for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me.
So there, it doesn't feel as overpowering, but Woods feels like he's somewhere. A super completely dry vocal just kind of feels weird to me, because as humans, we live in spaces. You know, we're not all walking around Earth in an anechoic chamber. That's weird and impossible. We're used to hearing a vocal in space. So when a vocal is completely dry to me, it's off-putting to me. It doesn't really feel right. So just a little something so we know, okay, he's somewhere, but on these dubs, I want those to splash more. So I'm sending more heavily into the slap for that. I am also sending to an 1/8 note delay and a 1/4 note delay. If you're not already setting up a mix template that you start all your mixes from, I really suggest doing that. I'm the kind of person, I don't like to do things more than once if I can help it. If I can set it up and know that it's gonna be right every time, then I can just sit down and just think about music and not be futzing around with where are my effects, where are my sends. So my mix template has a room or a short reverb, a hall or a longer reverb, 1/8 note delay, 1/4 note delay, and a slap. Every mix I start already has these effects right there. So if I just need to get something going real quick, oh, I need a little bit of vibe on the vocal, okay, turn up the slap. Oh, I want a delay on the dubs, okay, turn up the 1/8, and it's already there. I'll tweak these things over the course of it, but I'm not spending time thinking about routing and all that. I'm just being creative. Get the hard stuff out of the way to begin with, and then you're just making music, and that's the fun part. So just like my subgroups I showed you, my effects settings, my effects are already there, plugins loaded, so I can start and just get busy. So we've got, on the 1/8, we've got a little Echo Boy Jr. On the 1/4, we've got the stock Cubase 1/4 stereo delay. And then this is the repeater from the Slate bundle I've got that's doing the slap. So yes, it's a lot of delays going on for a dub track, but that's what gives it this movement.
That's come with me. That's
right? So that's giving the space, that's giving that, okay, well now, so he's kind of everywhere, he's not all at the same time. That's what's giving some nice character to those dubs against what is a mostly straightforward lead vocal, at least until we get the sauce on that. That's coming, I promised you, I didn't forget. Just what the balance of the dub is against the lead.
Scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me.
So it's, you know, how loud you want your dubs is all a matter of preference. Everything in mixing is a matter of preference. I like to have mine, I've been turning them down a little bit over the years, where they used to be very up front. I've been tucking them a little bit, and now I've got them sitting right behind the vocal. You know, a lot of people do, Kanye's known for it, you know, do the Kanye, like, hard pan stereo dubs, do 2 dub tracks, pan them out really wide. And that's cool and it's exciting and it's a lot of ear candy, but not every song needs all of that. This is mostly just a solo vocal song. We don't need 6 dubs all over the place, you know, taking you out of the element of what is Woods telling you this story right in front of your face. So that's a production choice to not even have them in the verse, just in the chorus, and just sprinkled in lightly. I promised you the sauce. Let's talk about the sauce. I'm gonna play this hook, and you see I got all this automation drawn in over here. I got a lot of stuff. Green, what are you doing? Let's find out what I'm doing with that.
Everything for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. That's everything for sale, set the scale, that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale, set.
So, Billy Woods exists in a lane of hip-hop that we call art rap. It's avant-garde, we do a lot of weird stuff. This is one of, actually, believe it or not, the more straightforward joints on this Terror Management album. But really, I'm very lucky that Billy Woods and other artists like that, they just send me the tracks and Green, just lay hands on it, just get busy. So they leave me to my own devices for whatever I wanna get into. And I kind of want some stutter effects here. It's, you know, it's a 2-bar hook it's one phrase he just repeats. Everything's for sale except the scale that's coming with me. He just repeats it over and it becomes this kind of chant. So I wanted to break it up with some stutter type stuff. So that's where you find, I've got this loop mash here from Steinberg, and it's DJ effects, like there's tape stops, there are stutter effects, there's repeats, there's all kinds of cool stuff. So we'll look at this now and you'll see what I was doing.
Everything for sale except the scale that's coming with me. That's coming with me. That's everything for sale except the scale that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale except.
So we got a little rewind, a little bit of kind of, you know, DJ rollback type stuff. But obviously that's not all that's going on in these spaces. What else am I doing? Well, why go halfway if you can go real big? And I actually, on my instrumental bus, I've got another instance of loop mash. Now, what's nice about having these buses is I can say, okay, I want to put effect on the whole instrumental, but I don't want to affect the vocal in the same way. Okay, well, I'll do it right there. All right, well, I want to put a filter on the vocal, or on these dubs, I lied. There's a little more sauce on the dubs. What I'm doing here, I've got the Waves Real ADT because I want to spread them a little bit. We didn't double track them, but I wanted them a little bit wide, so I got that on there. So I can apply effects to larger groups of things using my groups, or on a more local basis, affecting the tracks. So here I've got this loop mash. This is on the entire beat.
Everything for sale except the scale that's coming with me. That's coming with me. That's everything for sale except the scale that's coming with me. That's coming with me. Everything for sale except.
So I've got the wheelback stuff, the DJ stuff on the vocal, but I've got the stutter effects on the entire beat. I could have done it just on the drums, just on the music, but I wanted the effect of this global chop effect, not just on the drums, but really on the whole thing. And then on my effects bus, one thing I have is I have a Behringer Edison, which is a stereo processor on there. I like to spread my effects a little bit. It's not super crazy. Nothing sounds like it's behind you, unless we want to do that. But just for a nice spread. People listen to music in headphones nowadays, so I want to make sure that my stereo image is inviting and all-encompassing, so you feel like you're really inside of it. So that's what's going on with those stutter effects. But now, when we get later on in the hook, it gets to be more. So let's see what's going on over here.
Coming with me, that's coming with me. You can't pay with money, I know it's coming. You can't pay with money, I know what's coming. You can't pay with money, I know what's coming. You can't pay with money, I know what's coming.
So this here that you hear, obviously the vocal got distorted. I'm using the Native Instruments driver, which is one of my favorite distortions. They're all my favorite distortions. But this one, there's a resonance setting to it. There's an LFO in there, there's oscillator, there's a few things that you can do to get some unique sounds. So I wanted him to get a little grimy. This is the last song on the album. And so riding out like this, I wanted to get the solo performance, but I want to leave you a little scrunch-tastic. I want the scrunch, so we got to grime it up a little bit.
Coming with me, that's coming with me. You can't pay with money, I know it's coming. You can't pay with money,
All right, so because we get into the second refrain, and I wanted to give that a little bit different vibe than the first hook, just to give us a little more motion going out into the end of the song. And remember, the mix process is really part of the arrangement process. The things that we do here can change the song. If we mute that guitar line, this is a different record.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his point.
You know, and that voice is a lot lower.
Came through atop a half-dead mule, apostate marabou. Pale urchins put the swoosh on his pointy shoe, a slew of rare pelts, helm the skull.
You don't get that same enrapturing, same type of vibe because it's way pushed back. I want that vocal swirling given that ambience. So, you know, again, back to faders and pans, they're arrangement tools as much as they're mixing tools. We didn't talk about the mix bus compression like I promised, so we're gonna do that and then we'll talk about printing. So I got two compressors on here. I've got the Elysia Alpha that is set very fast. And then after that, I've got another one of the Millennia, the TCLs, the TCL2, and that's at a much slower attack and release. And neither one is doing a whole lot of work.
Came through atop of half that mule, apostate marabou, pale urchins put the...
The Elysia is here just to catch the transients from the drums, anything that might just be poking out a little bit too much, so we want to bring back in. But that's not smacking really hard, and I've even got the mix knob on that back to about 75%. Following that with the twin com, I've got, where are we? We're closer to like 80 milliseconds on the attack time, almost a second on the release. That's kind of the final coat. That's the gloss coat that you put on, you know, you wash your car, you put on the wax so it shines. That's the wax for the car, right? That's just to put that final blanket just to glue everything together. And then neither one is working that hard. So that's called serial compression, where you have one and then another one in series, and then neither one has to work that hard, and they can both just do what they're great at. So I print back, and I print 4 versions for every mix of every song that I do. I print the main mix, I print the TV track, which is the main mix minus the lead vocal. So when Woods goes and does his shows, it's still got his dubs in there, in case he doesn't have a hype man with him, but it doesn't have the lead vocal. So this lets the artist still have their dubs, they can catch their breath, or they have that energy, but they're actually rapping and performing for you on stage. Then I print an instrumental, which is what it sounds like, and I print the acapella. So these things, I print them every single time. So if someone wants to do a remix and I'm out of town, I'm not holding up the whole game because someone needs the acapella from me and it hasn't been made. I deliver all these to the client, and then they can go and do whatever they need with them. Stems as well, got the mix limit, that's why I send out for approval. And everything just records right back into Cubase, so I have it right where I need it, and I don't have to go looking for stuff. So that is, in general, the quick version of how I mix a song. You know, I don't always move in a straight line because it's whatever the song is telling me at that moment I need to get to. But I make sure I get to all of the things. It's just a matter of when the song lets me know I need to get there. So that's how we mix here in the greenhouse. That's how we get down. Again, my name is Paul Womack, and they call me Willie Green, and that's what I know. Peace.
Billy Woods, European vacation.